Hello and welcome back to My Mom's Basement, ladies and gentlemen. I am here with Adam Cole, a return guest. He is taking on Kyle O'Reilly in a straight up wrestling match on July 6th at the Great American Bash. This is going to be on USA Network. So I said to Kyle O'Reilly, there's really no excuse for anyone not to watch this, being that it's on USA. It's like must watch TV, in my opinion. I asked him the same thing, but you guys have wrestled a million times.
hmm
You always keep it fresh. What's the secret to that?
This is going to sound very broad, but I'll kind of go into explaining it. It's the chemistry. Ever since 2009, when we met, again, I had been wrestling for like a year. Kyle had been wrestling a little bit longer than me, but we had this instant connection where we just gelled on every level. And I think the other thing that really keeps it fresh is I kind of have my own ideas, and Kyle has his own ideas. And we're very good at being able to combine those two things to make something feel fresh and different and original. Because I like to kind of shake things up and change things up, and Kyle's the exact same way. So somehow we've managed to keep stuff different and exciting. And I do think at the end of the day, because the chemistry is so strong, between the ropes, I think on top of that too, that also makes people intrigued and interested in kind of what we bring to the table. So both of us have the mentality of constantly growing and developing as performers. So there are things about me that change year to year, even if they're really, really subtle and small things. So I'm really, really looking forward to the Great American Bash.
Yeah, I was actually at Final Battle 2016 where you guys had that
Amazing.
main event. So I was there for that and I could see how much you guys have evolved and I could, speak to that. You guys are completely different performers at this
Yeah.
point, completely different characters. Do you enjoy the art of like crafting a match, or is that sort of like the boring part before you actually get to go out there like in front of a crowd, especially now that people are back? Is that part of the job that you enjoy, or is that like just something that you do?
So it depends. Sometimes it can be incredibly stressful, and that all depends on circumstances. If stuff is thrown together last minute, again, there's just so many different factors. But generally speaking, the process of putting it together is actually really exciting. Especially it's kind of the full circle thing where you enjoy it even more after you've done it, where like you'll kind of have this idea of like, hey, maybe if we do this, this will get the audience to respond this way. And then if you talk about it and then you do it and that's what happens, it's such a cool feeling. It's really, really fun. So creatively, I do really enjoy it, especially if I'm in there with another super creative, inspired guy as well. So yeah, the process can be really, really fun.
Are there any wrestling tropes or like pet peeves that you have personally that you try to avoid in your matches?
Ooh, um, that's a great question. Well, okay. This is a this is a very standard thing, but I remember, and the only reason it's a pet peeve is because I used to do it. So, which is why. But when I was a baby face, oftentimes early in my career, before matches, I would always start with like the trying to get everyone to clap thing.
Yep.
And going back and looking at myself doing that, I'm like, oh, that's so cringe. Look at me just pandering so much. So if I see a baby face doing that, or if I see a guy that I'm in there with doing that, I always make sure to say, I'm not like angry at them or anything, but I'm
Yeah.
like, man, trust me, you're so cool. Just give it 2 minutes. They're going to do that organically on their own. You don't have to tell them to do it. So that kind of is a pet peeve of mine. Yeah, the whole like, come on, here we go. Cheer for
We're
me.
about to wrestle. Yep.
Yep, we're about to wrestle. Applaud for us already. Here we go.
Sort of in that same realm, when do you feel like Adam Cole became the Adam Cole that we know today?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, I've been pretending to be really confident for a really long time, and I've been, I think, fairly decent at that. But there was definitely a phase where, again, I was very much playing this character, and inside I was freaking out. To some extent, I. I mean, I'm definitely nervous before every single match still. That will never go away. And if it does, then I should probably, step out of it. So I definitely feel that. But I think oddly enough, it was So I had a run with the Ring of Honor World Championship and the Pro Wrestling Guerrilla World Championship. And even in that point, I still felt like I was kind of developing who I was. And in a weird way, I had taken 4 months off. It was the only time I had ever been out with any sort of injury, knock on wood, and where I had shoulder, tricep, and elbow surgery. And I remember when I came back, being really nervous and thinking, God, are they going to care? Because I was like just kind of gaining this, proper main event independent wrestler steam right before I had gotten that injury. And I remember when I came back in Philadelphia and the crowd was completely invested. That gave me so much confidence in like, okay, they want me to succeed. They want me to do well. And I have to be doing something right. So it was not as much second guessing of myself at that point and more like, okay, this is the way that I'm going. I'm going to, full throttle go this direction and really believing in my vision of what this character was. And then it was kind of off to the races at that point. So that was a big moment for me.
That's awesome. I remember that vividly. You were wearing the sleeve. I remember your elbow was like all puffy for a bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
were you one of the people that over the past year, the last year, enjoyed like learning how to wrestle in front of a crowd, learning the different aspects of it, or were you a John Moxley type? I saw he did an interview and he was like, "I hated it and I never want to wrestle in front of nobody ever again. Like I want the
Oh,
crowds back always."
oh yeah. So yeah, wrestling in front of no one versus wrestling in front of people. 100% of the time, I would rather wrestle in front of people. Like when fans say that they're excited to come back and watch wrestling events, I promise you, the wrestlers are more excited than you are. Seriously, like it
Yeah.
is. We can't wait. It was a very interesting adjustment though. Like it's very weird to go out there and again do your match or do your interview in front of nobody. The nerves were still there for two reasons. One, because you care, you want to do well, it's going to be broadcast on television. And then secondly, you got Triple H and Shawn Michaels, back there watching you as well. So of course, two guys that I respect more than anybody are watching me do my thing. So I want to impress them, and I want to impress them even if the fans are there too. So I did have that in the back of my mind. But again, every bump, every slam, every hit hurts so much more when there
Without
is
the
no
adrenaline.
audience. Yeah, my God. Even like again at NXT, having the few people that we do have there, what a difference. It feels like there's 10,000 people there. It really
Just some
does.
energy, right? After
Right.
like the vacuum of the last year. Did you
Yeah.
feel like there were lessons to be learned in wrestling in front of nobody, or like lessons that you can apply to now wrestling in front of a crowd?
Yeah, I think so. So I think when we wrestled in front of nobody, there's a lot less overthinking. It was almost like, okay, this is kind of where we think it should go. So well, let's just do it. It's not like we're gonna know if it's good or if it's bad because there's nobody there to tell us if it's good or bad. And then in some ways that has kind of bled over into the audience being back. And there's a big difference between not overthinking and not caring. It's not that, oh yeah, whatever, we'll just do whatever we want. Who cares? Who cares what they think? But it's more not second guessing yourself so much. And that has paid off in a lot of ways because again, sometimes you can spend so much time thinking, okay, where are we tonight? We're in New York City. Okay. The crowd's probably going to be more like this. So maybe we should do that. And that is still great to have, but having more confidence in what you're going to do and what you're going to bring to the table really did kind of help bleed over into when we did have fans back. Because now, again, the fans are just so excited to be able to come and watch a wrestling show again. And like I said, I promise we as the wrestlers are just as excited.
Did you have a favorite match that you had over the pandemic, over the no crowd era?
God, yeah, favorite one. One that really I guess this doesn't even really count because there were some people there, but there weren't like fans back in the in the building at that point. And I hate to say this, but the Pat McAfee one was pretty memorable, just because that was such an interesting time in the sense of people fully expected it to fail, it to just absolutely be terrible. It was wild. And again, I know there were some people from, the Performance Center that were there, but it wasn't like an actual audience. And that one really sticks out to me as one that I thought, man, if there was 15,000 people here, this would have been crazy,
Would have been
So
insane.
yeah, would have been absolutely wild. So that one sticks out as being really memorable, just because of how wild that entire process was.
I love that answer. I, obviously, as Pat's friend, I'm like, fuck yeah,
Of
Pat.
course, of course. Screw Pat McAfee, but yeah.
Yeah, fuck him. So we're talking about the Great American Bash. I read these
Yeah.
matches off to Kyle yesterday. I just wanted to read them off to you as well. The first ever Great American Bash main event was July 6th, 1985, and it was Tully Blanchard versus Dusty Rhodes in a steel cage match. That just sounds like an all-time classic, right? You can't script a better match. And then I thought this was just a funny parallel to it. The first ever WWE Great American Bash main event was The Undertaker versus the Dudley Boys in a handicapped concrete crypt match in 2004.
Wow.
Going off that, I know you were such a massive WWE fan your whole life. Do you have a favorite Great American Bash memory?
Oh, it's interesting that you say that, because I do remember clear as day so I was a big fan of the magazine back in the day.
Me too.
And this it doesn't necessarily answer your question, but you saying The Undertaker versus the Dudley Boys in the handicap match, I remember, because I wasn't allowed to order the pay-per-views when I was younger. So much of my experience with the pay-per-views with WWE was the magazines. And I remember the photos for the Undertaker and the Dudley Boys handicap, the concrete crypt match or whatever. I remember them looking so insane, and going to my dad and being like, Dad, you have to let me start ordering the pay-per-views. Look at this. Look how crazy this is. And honestly, to this day, I don't even know if I've ever seen the match start to finish. But to
Yeah.
I remember as a kid being like, this looks so insane. I mean, and that's just, within WWE, obviously we talk about Tully and Dusty as well. There've been so many awesome different moments with the Great American Bash. But and then I myself look at the Great American Bash, last year, or with, me and Keith Lee. So Great American Bash, whether it be as a fan or whether it be me as a performer, have always been pretty important.
It's awesome. I'm looking forward to it a ton. Now,
Yeah,
I
me too.
want your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, not talking historic, not talking greatest, Adam Cole's personal favorite.
Yeah, you got it. So the four that stick out to me as far as what they mean to me, Shawn Michaels is obviously on that list. Stone Cold Steve Austin is on that list. Kurt Angle is my other one. And then CM Punk is number 4. That is for all personal different reasons. Sean being the relationship that we have now. And again, I really do think he's the greatest pro wrestler of all time. Stone Cold Steve Austin is the reason I am a wrestling fan in the first place. Kurt Angle, I think at one point made me really appreciate the skill and technical ability of what we do. And again, in 2004, like nobody could touch Kurt Angle.
I was going to ask, like, what's your favorite era of Kurt Angle?
Yeah, 2004 Kurt Angle is
Yeah.
like when he was like just a killer. Like it was, my God, he was so amazing. And also, interesting side note, but Kurt Angle was the first wrestler that I ever met. And I remember he was so nice to me that I could not stop thinking about it or talking about it for like 6 months as a kid. And that to this day has made me realize anytime I meet fans to always be nice and thoughtful and kind because of my interaction with Kurt Angle. And then CM Punk was the guy who got me into the independents, Ring of Honor, started watching stuff overseas. His promo ability is second to none. I've made it very obvious before that he's a guy that I have studied quite a bit. as far as promos go. So those four, as far as my personal Mount Rushmore, are the ones that stick out to me.
As such a big CM Punk fan myself,
Yeah,
it's so nice to see over the past couple of years the bridge kind of be mended a little bit, and not turn in terms of like, I'm not, CM Punk's not coming back, I don't think,
sure.
but in terms of just like seeing him tweet about wrestling, talk about
Yeah,
wrestling, and seeing a lot of wrestlers feel more comfortable about talking about CM Punk again. It's just nice because he obviously left such a huge historical footprint on this era of the business, and it's nice to see that recognized.
he did. He did. As a matter of fact, I do think guys like him and guys like Daniel Bryan are somewhat responsible for me having a job here. I really, really do.
The
Like,
whole, yeah, they kicked the door open for the independents, right?
they really, really did. They made everybody open their eyes and say, hey, there are guys out there who can bring a lot to the table. Again, being independent wrestlers. So I don't know if he feels that way about it, but I certainly do. But I just remember, God, I know it's a famous one with his pipe bomb promo, but he has been cutting pipe bomb promos his entire career. There was a promo he did, against Raven in Ring of Honor that was so good.
Leading up to the dog collar match.
Leading up to the dog collar match, because I remember I actually bought a best of. Literally, and I won't go off on a super long tangent, but I went to this website called obsessedwithwrestling.com. That was like the really popular one. And there were all these articles talking about CM Punk. And I'm like, who is this guy? So, but everyone was talking about he was the best in the world or whatever. So I was like, I'm going to order this best of CM Punk Ring of Honor DVD. And I did. And this is honestly the truth. I remember watching it and like, I really liked his matches, but I wasn't like, this is the greatest wrestler I've ever seen. And it is zero knock. It was just like, oh, cool. This guy's cool. Then he cut a promo and I'm like, this guy's my favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
He automatically in that one promo. And then all of his matches were my favorite. All of his promos were my favorite because he grabbed me that much just from that interview. And that's his skill. He can, whether it's bell to bell, whether it's, cutting promos, he's awesome. He's amazing. He's inspired a lot of people.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I do want to talk about the background. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, you can't see it. Go on over to YouTube. Adam Cole has what looks like the dream basement set up over here. Is this in a basement?
It is not in a basement. It's in its own
All right.
room. So I still call it the game cave. So you would
Nice.
think it's like a basement, but it's its own individual room here.
What have you been playing lately?
So I've been playing a little bit of everything. Right now I'm going through, I just recently finished Doom Eternal, which has been really fun. I'm playing through the Bloodborne DLC, which has been a blast. I'm slowly working away at Cyberpunk 2077. But also
I've heard so much about that. People are saying it. Is it like playable now? Can you get through it?
So I've never had an issue, but fortunately, I was one of those very, 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 very lucky people that managed to grab an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5. So I am not playing it on last gen hardware, but I have never had an issue with
So
Cyberpunk.
that was the issue people were having with it. It was all the last gen systems.
Right. People playing on Xbox One and base PS4s were having a lot of problems. But for me, I didn't have an issue whatsoever.
So let me ask you this: as I'm a moderate video game guy. I'm not anywhere near your level. I've been an Xbox guy most of my life. I haven't gotten either of the new systems. Which one would you recommend?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So there are pros and cons to both. So the Xbox Series X on paper is technically more powerful than the PlayStation 5. But when you, and I like the UI of the Xbox,
the controller, right? It's like a better feel. Yeah, I'm with you.
The backwards compatibility, but the PlayStation, again, the new PS5 controller with the haptic feedback is insane. The list of first party exclusives are amazing. I do think the PS5 is a little bit faster in some ways. However, I will always be a general video game guy. I love Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, PC, VR, you name it. I love it. But if I had to suggest one, I will say I do think Xbox Series X is the way to go. just depending on what you want. Again, if there are certain PlayStation first party exclusives like God of War and Last of Us and
Spider-Man is a
Horizon,
big one for me. I'm like, that's why I bought a
Spider-Man,
PS4. When they came out with the
right?
Spider-Man game, I was like, all right, now I need this.
And here's what I will say: no matter which one you get, it's a good investment. They're
Yeah.
both excellent consoles. Excellent.
I'm
So
excited for you to say that you would recommend the Xbox though, because that is the one that I want to lean towards. So as long as you weren't
yeah,
like, no, it sucks, that's probably the one I'm going with.
it
I
is
wanted to ask
amazing.
this. This is like more of a specific question to this show, but I'm such a big Star Wars fan. Do you have a favorite Star Wars video game?
Oh yes, it's a very recent one. It's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Have you played this one?
I have. I loved it.
Oh my
What a
god,
likable
it's
character Cal
so
was, huh?
good. So likable. The story is amazing. The combat was incredible.
The puzzles were
I
tricky.
love it. Yes, yeah, and the exploration too of like I love in games where you have a mission, but then there's a bunch of stuff kind of on the side, and you're like, I'm gonna go explore, and then all of a sudden Cal is fighting this mini boss who's like
Yes.
super
You could take
hard.
your time with it. That's one of my favorite things in a video game where you're not like on a time thing. All right, get through this, get through that. Like you could go on the side missions, like you said,
Right.
changing the ponchos, changing the little droids paint
Yep.
scheme. Like I'm
Yep.
glad you said that because that was one of my favorites, and they're coming out with a sequel as well.
Yes, yes. I cannot wait for it. I mean, God, and the way they left us on the end of the first one was incredible. So I'm very excited for part two.
There's even
Very
some
excited.
speculation because the actor that played Cal, he did the motion capture, is a pretty legit actor. He was in Shameless, he was in Gotham. There's some speculation that they're going to bring him into the live action stuff, possibly even the Bad Batch cartoon. So fingers
Oh,
crossed.
nice.
We're getting real nerdy on this
Yeah,
podcast now.
and
Let
I
me
love it.
remind everybody Kyle O'Reilly versus Adam Cole on July 6th. This one is a straight up wrestling match. It's going to be the Great American Bash, and we're going to create a new Great American Bash highlight here. It's going to be Tully Blanchard, Dusty Rhodes, Undertaker, and the Dudleys, Adam Cole versus Keith Lee, and then Adam Cole versus Kyle O'Reilly. Adam, thank you
Yes.
so much for the time. I appreciate it as always.
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate it, man.